Good evening and welcome to the midweek news conference put on by the United National Congress. And we are doing so today under the theme, Our Nation is in Social and Economic Turmoil. On my left is my colleague, the Chief Economist in the Office of the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Tahakwa Obika. And I will be presenting, I'll handle more from the perspective of the national security, and my colleague will be dealing primarily with the economic turmoil that is visiting our country at this time. Before we begin, I would like you to look at a video that will show the trauma our young citizens, our children, primary school children are experiencing under this government of Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. I want you to see the fear in this child.
Be quiet. Be quiet, children. Be quiet. The other side is answering. Aisha. Oh my God, children.
Isn't that a shame? Isn't that a disgrace, colleague? The little children, the future, the flower of our nation, to be undergoing that kind of trauma, and we expect them to compete in the 21st century with students from all over the world, the best and the brightest. This is a disgrace. Dr. Rowley and his government should hold their heads in shame. That is an indictment. Now, after listening last evening to Prime Minister Keith Christopher Rowley, it is clear that this country has no hope whatsoever of ever effectively dealing with crime under his leadership. No hope whatsoever. We heard the rantings of an old man blaming everyone and every institution except himself and his clueless band of non-performing ministers, not accepting responsibility for our crime predicament, such as we saw with the little child. We heard basically questionable solutions last evening. Our crime after 510 murders for the year and a possible local government elections, which he stands to lose. He came out of hiding, silenced by Keith Rowley for 7 long years, but a sudden rush to tell us ill-conceived ideas about his plans to solve crime. Nonsense. Nothing made sense. He made 3 points. 3 points. in terms of dealing with crime. One, new expenditures on non-functional CCTV cameras. That is his big solution. His second solution, the resuscitation of the failed Bail Amendment Act and the impotent anti-gang legislation. And his third solution, more boots on the ground, which we have heard since the days of Operation Anaconda in 2002, more than 20 years ago. Same old solutions, same old prescriptions, all of them not working. Let's deal with them seriatim, one by one. The non-functional CCTV cameras. Did it take a whole day, an entire day, for the Prime Minister to identify that CCTV coverage was necessary? Dr. Rowley's statement that 2,500 CCTVs were being installed, with a further 2,000 to come, that rang hollow. We have been down that road before. Will 5,000 CCTVs be adequately maintained? Will they be manned 24/7 as is done in first world countries, including Singapore? Just April this year, Hines said that of the 1,796 closed-circuit televisions, cameras, installed throughout Trinidad and Tobago, 733 are not fully functional or non-functional. What a shame. Have those been repaired, by the way? So we hope that this statement by Dr. Rowley is not just another mama guy to keep us sidetracked while crime continues unabated. I want to show the hypocrisy of this government. That there were no actual expenditures on CCTV items in the estimates of expenditure. Who is he fooling? When you look at the estimates of expenditure, item 031, acquisition of CCTV for the prison service. Actual expenditure in 2021, zero. Actual expenditure the year before in 2020, zero. When we look at other items, 036, installation of CCTVs at the YTC Center. Actual expenditures in 2019, 2020, 2021, zero. Z-E-R-O, nada. And we got that from the pages 56, 53, and 53 of the development program for the respective years. Item 037, installation of CCTV systems at the Port of Spain prison. Nothing in 2019, zero in 2020, nothing at all in 2021, 2021, 2022, and 2023. So what is this talk? You suddenly catch a vaps and come to tell us that CCTV are the panacea to assist in solving crime. But when we look at this whole CCTV arrangement by this government, it speaks of problems, it speaks of bureaucracy, and it speaks of corruption. In an exclusive report dated April 13, the Express said, they quoted Dr. Rowley, that he acknowledged that Cabinet pulled the CCTV contract 2 weeks ago as a result of concerns raised, including why TSTT was sidelined despite being the majority-owned company by the state. So here we are, 7 long years later, we have a story of non-functioning CCTV cameras. We have a story of no actual expenditures despite the old talk by that government. And we have possible corruption in the procurement process. And I asked the question, even if CCTV's cameras were working, people would be fearful today to provide evidence, given the fact that the witness protection program has failed to provide the necessary assurances to potential witnesses. Would that child, when she grows up, would she be willing to give evidence living in an environment of fear and murder and mayhem. Minister Rowley also said last night that he announced a 12-month tax break on the purchase of CCTV cameras. So who are we fooling? This is all news. In 2017, to be exact, similar tax breaks were offered on the purchase of CCTV cameras, and it had little or no effect. So what is Dr. Rowley coming last night to pontificate, and he thinks that we cannot think? His second point, the resurrection of the failed Bail Amendment Act and the important anti-gang legislation. And we say that the resurrection of the bail bill by Rowley is another red herring. Oh God, solve the crime now, man. Stop throwing out distractions. We supported the Bail Amendment Bill in 2019. He would have you believe that we do not support legislation. What we say is we will support good legislation. So we supported the Bail Amendment Bill in 2019. But here this report from Loop, August 1st, 2019. The controversial Bail Amendment Bill was passed without amendments in the House of Representatives on Wednesday night with the full support of the opposition. End of quote. So we will not support it now. Putting Dr. Rowley on notice. He knows that. He knows it hasn't worked. He knows that there is no data existing to support its continued existence. So I challenge Dr. Rowley to tell me how many convictions resulted from holding suspects for 120 days to collect the necessary evidence. And tell us, especially when the Forensic Science Center is not working and the DPP's office remain significantly understaffed. The bail bill will overcrowd an overburdened remand yard. What happens to the accused after 120 days if the evidence has not been collected and the case cannot be started? Would it not encourage a policy of merely locking up citizens with no urgency to build a strong case to ensure expeditious trials and convictions? Would it lead to mass incarceration? We already have disturbingly high global rankings per capita for numbers of our citizens in prison. It is 276 citizens per 100,000 of our population. We have more prisoners per capita than Jamaica, than Iraq, than Iran, where they're locking up persons, women in particular, for protesting on the streets. We have more prisoners per capita in Iran, Colombia, and Mexico. And when it comes to the Bail Amendment Bill, what was our present AG not against the bill when he was the president of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago? On June 28, 2016, Attorney General Reginald Amo, as president of the Law Association, listed numerous concerns regarding the bill and the anti-gang bills proposed at that time. These issues still hold true, he said. And hear what he said. 1. Neither piece of legislation, that is the Anti-Gang or Bail Act, has acted as a deterrent to the commission of serious crimes. That is Amo talking. Nor has there been any explanation or statistics presented to show that either piece of legislation has in essence reduced the crime rate. So Reginald Amo was saying in 2016 that there's no evidence to show that the bail bill is working. He went on to say, then, wearing another hat, the significant deficiencies of the forensic system resulting in unreasonable delays in forensic testing means that persons are unlikely to have matters involving the use of a firearm heard within at a minimum 2 to 3 years. But that was 2016. Today, the same Attorney General may tell us another story, but from a hotel, small hotel room in London. They rarely take us for fools. The incompetent anti-gang legislation. Today there have been no convictions under that anti-gang legislation. Guardians, September the 11th, 2022, it speaks about bloody gang rivalry and brazen killings, such as we saw at the beginning of this program. They have now overtaken parts of Tunapuna, as many young men find it easier to access firearms for as little as $500 to commit crimes. The Express report talks about the SSA annual report predicting increase in murders, injuries, etc. because of the number of gangs. Why does the SSA not act to help us find out information about these gangs, monitor them so that we could understand, take preventative action before the crimes are committed? And we say anti-gang legislation or no anti-gang legislation. Gangs run many communities in Trinidad and Tobago. The third solution put forward last evening by Dr. Rowley, more boots on the ground. Well, we have heard this since Operation Anaconda 212. Acting Police Commissioner McDonald Jacob, this is in August 16, said yesterday that they were concerned with the upsurge in violent crimes in the past weeks, the majority of which are attributed to gang rivalry. He knows, we know, the country knows that gangs run the country, and what is needed is not, and that would help, boots on the ground, but that is not the totality of the picture. We need a complementary, high-tech, all of government, data-driven approach to dealing with crime. So after hearing the Prime Minister's useless 3 points that he thinks will magically reduce crime, we and the UNC were not impressed. He offered no new ideas on crime, no transcendental policies, not a word on crime prevention strategies, not a funeral note on crime rehabilitation tactics, nothing about a realignment of priorities within the Ministry of National Security. Nothing to inspire confidence and give us hope. But you see, Dr. Rowley has a problem. He seems to forget that we are now in the age of communications technology, that we can easily record what he said yesterday and compare it with what his prescriptions are today. And my mother always told me that a liar must have a good memory. And Dr. Rowley clearly does not have a good memory. Remember when he said he's not shutting down Petrotrin? Well, I must have gone in the fridge when he said that. Dr. Rowley, for example, tells us with a straight face that the PNM in opposition supported the People's Partnership legislative agenda. I couldn't believe I was hearing that from our Prime Minister last evening, but that was last night. Dr. Rowley simply forgot that according to the Trinidad Guardian dated 21st September 2012, he's reported as saying, quote, "We want to put the government on notice that from here on in, for whatever time they remain in office, they can expect no cooperation whatsoever from the opposition." Rowley said that. And that was 2012. We still had 3 years in office. So for 3 years, he said no cooperation. But last night, he's accusing us of not supporting, even though we supported a plethora of legislation, which I do not have time to give today. Again, last evening, Keith Christopher Rowley washed his mouth on the UNC, saying that all we hear from the UNC and the opposition leader is, quote, "call elections now." That was yesterday evening. But Rowley simply forgot that in 2012, the Trinidad Guardian reports that headlined an article, and the headline was, "Call fresh elections now," says Rowley. The same Rowley in 2012, accusing us of what he did in 2012. What manner of man do we have as our Prime Minister? So you see why we in the UNC do not trust Keith Christopher Rowley. How can we trust him when they talk about white-collar crime, while they gutted the procurement legislation to facilitate inflated legal briefs to family friends and financiers, gutted the procurement legislation. We say to facilitate inflated briefs to friends and family. Can we trust him not to compromise the CCJ as he has done with every so-called independent oversight institution in Trinidad and Tobago, including the Law Association, the Service Commission, our Calypsonians, and the Fourth Estate? All have been compromised, bullied, bought out, compromised. Dr. Rowley last evening reminded us, as is his habit, that he was 73 years old. He was blessed, in his view, because he had passed the proverbial 70. Rowley then boastfully admonished the opposition leader, Kamla Prasad Bisesa, by saying, and I quote, "She must learn to respect her elders," end of quote. It's Dr. Rowley speaking to my political leader. It did not occur to Dr. Rowley that I'm 6 months his elder, and I find it utterly disrespectful of him to chase me out of the country of my birth and angrily and erratically say in Parliament of all places that I must migrate to Barbados or Guyana. No respect whatsoever for me, his elder. Do so, don't like so. But then in Rowley's mind, the biblical injunction of respecting elders does not apply to him. He's PNM. Great is the PNM. And therefore he's absolved from the biblical injunction to behave in particular ways. So it was indeed hard to take last evening the plethora of distortions uttered by Dr. Rowley. It was distortion after distortion. Last evening, he said with a straight face, as if he's talking to children, that the eminent idea of dividing the Ministry of National Security into Home Affairs and Defense, and this is an idea put forward by our political leader. He says that it only existed in countries like the US and Russia, which fight wars and possess large armies and naval forces. Really, Dr. Rowley? Really? Singapore, they don't like to hear about Singapore. Singapore has never fought a war as an independent nation, and yet, go and check Dr. Rowley. It has a separate Ministry of Home Affairs on the one hand, and a Ministry of Defense on the other. Let me explain to Dr. Rowley. One, we are in the midst of a war on crime. It is not simply a public health emergency. It is war. And secondly, a misfit like Fitzgerald Hines clearly cannot multitask. He cannot manage the twin portfolios of Home Affairs and Defense. And that is why our fishermen in Calais Bay when they call for help from the Coast Guard against pirates, the response, if at all, takes days instead of minutes. Clearly, we need somebody to protect our external borders, and we need somebody to handle our homeland security. Dr. Rowley pretended last night that he cares. For example, he praised profusely the efforts of the police to take guns off the streets. He boasted yesterday 755 guns removed in 2020. He boasted 681 guns a year later and 576 in 2022. It never occurred to Dr. Rowley that the police could remove all the guns off the streets. But if guns arrive on our shores as immediate replacements, the numbers removed by the police simply do not matter. It is the police job to remove as many guns as possible off our streets. And it is his job to prevent guns from arriving on our shores. But last evening, there was total silence on scanners. Total silence. It is his government's responsibility to provide the scanners at all ports of entry to stop the inflow of guns. They boast of the importance of getting guns off the street, yet very little budgeted for port scanners. Dr. Rowley's inept government, which ensures that high-powered guns are readily available in our country, he has to take the blame. Is it, and we ask, a deliberate strategy to ensure malfunctioning scanners so that guns can enter carte blanche into Trinidad and Tobago. We ask, why does this billion-dollar funded SSA not do electronic monitoring of the few who have the money and connections to bring SR-15s and AK-47s, each of which we are told cost $50,000? Are these people helping them with the roof at Balize House? Is it that the meeting with the top brass of the TTPS was a mere sham to give the country the impression that this inept PNM administration is serious about crime? They're not. Rowley's government is complicit in crime. Let me repeat. Rowley's government is complicit in crime. It is not my view. It is the view of the US government that our government is complicit in human trafficking. The July 1922 report, US Trafficking in Persons report, indicated that Trinidad maintained its position on the Tier 2 watch list in part because, quote, it did not take action against senior government officials alleged 2 years ago in 2020 to be involved in human trafficking, end of quote. What a disgrace. This is what this administration has turned our paradise into, a monumental disgrace. No wonder we remain on the EU blacklist, and a former EU Minister of Taxation from Denmark has called this administration, quote, a nook of shame for tax evasion and money laundering. So this administration has no moral authority to lecture anyone on crime and criminality. Credit Card, Camille, Robinson, Regis cannot lecture us on white-collar crime. What higher standard is she talking about that the PNM is held to? She's talking about Nelson Gate? She's talking about Email Gate? So we are convinced on this side that Monday's National Security Council meeting was a waste of time. As our leader said, it was a pappy show. Dr. Rowley said that his government took the opportunity to ask senior officers of the TTPS what the state could do for them in the fight against crime. And I hope the senior officers were not overwhelmed and failed to speak truth to power. Were they afraid to tell the government that 4% offer was not sufficient? This after the Finance Minister Imbut last evening boasted that the government was awash in surplus revenues estimated at $11 billion. $11 billion. And you offer the TTPS that you say that you are giving all the resources they asked for. You give them 4%. Did seniors in any way echo the views of the Police Social Welfare Association that police officers lacked uniforms, bulletproof vests, office supplies like printers, paper, ink, and stamps? And despite their yeoman service in the pandemic as first responders, they were not honored either financially or in the national awards for their dedicated service in the pandemic. So Dr. Rowley could cry crocodile tears about supporting efforts of the TTPS. You see, the TTPS could take that mama guy if they so wish. But I know the constituents of Naparima are fully aware of the fact that there are dire shortage of vehicles in the 3 police stations which serve the constituents at Barkpore, St. Madeleine, and Princestown. And last evening, Rowley had the infantry to tell us boldly that PNM has an unblemished record regarding white-collar crime. Somebody needs to remind him of Patrick Solomon, Johnny O'Halloran, the Soros scandal, Gene Miles, and recently Inez Gate and Nelson Gate. Neither Rowley nor his cabinet were aware of Vincent Nelson arrangements. He told us that last night. I couldn't believe. Our response is that we simply do not believe him, because the former AG has already admitted to the police that he discussed this case with the Prime Minister, he discussed it with Hines, he discussed it with Stuart Young, and Sagram Singh Suklal. They could hide, but the facts are there. In my Bush lawyer's understanding from what I have read on this indemnity agreement, we are witnessing crimes in bribery, perversion of the course of justice, and misbehavior in public office. And they have the bold-facedness, the effrontery to say that they are pinnacles of virtue when it comes to white-collar crime. But they want us to sweep Vincent Nelson scandal under the carpet. We will not. We want to tell Dr. Rowley, you can run from Nelson Gate, but you cannot hide. Vincent Nelson will be your Waterloo. And I want to talk a little bit about the cluelessness, ineptitude, and awkwardness that was written on Dr. Rowley's face last evening. I want to let him know we are fed up. We are tired of the same old cock and bull rambling. I want to tell him we cannot go on this way. We have no commissioner of police today because of his interference. And yet he speaks about his respect last evening for the separation of powers concept. They give us a dotish 10-point crime plan that made no sense. The 10-point crap was the best that the PNM could offer in 2015, and it is in large part explains why our citizens in Trinidad and Tobago feel unsafe today. So where are we today? We saw the picture of the little girl. We hear descriptions. A lady, this is the Guardian, October 30th. This is what a victim of home invasion said. Quote, my husband died from stress, staying up at night, watching out for bandits, with no sleep from the constant fear of break-ins. We suffered over the years, the same effect as if the criminals use a gun or a knife to kill him. Another citizen, right, one said, I loaded every room in the house with a bladed weapon. In case somebody came in any room, he would have a cutlass. This is Dr. Rowley's legacy. These are their results. This is what they ignore daily. The cries of every citizen, every business owner, every child, and the elderly. But this is how our citizens live today, fearful. I want to talk a little bit that our government is complicit in crime. I spoke about the dysfunctional sport scanners, spoke about the Coast Guard, right? That you know, anytime you call, the fishermen call, or you're in distress in the sea, they are the Coast Guard, not the Coast Guard. You build an army base in La Romaine, right? This is cluelessness. Why open an army base in La Romaine? Why not Sejus or Moruga, where drugs and human trafficking occur? Why not have them where the problem is? But you have them in La Romaine. Those of us who live from, so know how far that is from. It'll take you an hour to get to Carcass. Soldiers. How many soldiers do we currently have? Can they be better utilized in the fight against crime? We're feeding them. They're strong, they're young. Why can't we not incorporate them in the fight against crime? And I've spoken about the SSA, right? That money could be used elsewhere. We talk about examples. This government engages, the senior persons in this government, they engage in all types of misbehavior in public office. We can go so far as to talk about witness tampering, bribery, perverting the course of justice. When you would see ministers recusing themselves in maneuvers to enrich family and friends, they think, if the priest could play, who is we? That is the subliminal message to our young people. And I could go on and on about the areas which suggest complicity. Now, our political leader has articulated a UNC master plan for dealing with crime. She has, and I wouldn't go in details, but I'll send that into the media. The idea of restructuring of the Ministry of National Security. Prime Minister Rowley wanted to pour scorn on that idea, but it is the excellent idea. We cannot have a super ministry run by somebody of the caliber of Fitzgerald Hines. He just is not able to handle these two discrete, important portfolios. Our leader spoke about an increase in the retirement age of Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force personnel to bring it in line with other arms of the protective services. She talked about improving the quality and qualifications and readiness of recruits to the police service, diplomas, undergraduate and postgraduate degree in policing for recruits combined with a police apprenticeship program. In the NYPD, you have to have college credits in order to get into the New York Police Department. Why are we in Trinidad remaining in the 16th century, in the 20th century? She talked about pre-court trial detention and bail reform. But these are UNC ideas, excellent ideas. But instead of Dr. Rowley entertaining respectfully, looking at them, discussing the ideas, reasoning together with the opposition, he scoffs as if he is the creator of all wisdom and knowledge. He is too hardened. We call on the Prime Minister to do the necessary introspection about his government's handling of crime. It is time that the people of Trinidad and Tobago recognize that you cannot continue to vote PNM and expect positive results. You cannot plant corn and expect wheat. You reap what you sow. It is high time that the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago recognize that Keith Christopher Rowley is a massive, monumental disaster. You elect this dangerous man at your own peril. It is all up to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. No one else. You can't wash your hands like Pontius Pilate. You have to make the decision, give the evidence before you, and make a decision in the interest of your children, your family, and your grandchildren yet on board. No one else is responsible. Ladies and gentlemen, with these words, I thank you, and I hand you over to my colleague, Mr. Tahakwa Obika.
Thank you very much, MP Charles. And I too want to highlight the travesty that we are seeing in that video, because that school, many persons may not know, that Rose Hill Primary School is the school that one of our brightest stars in the Calypso arena, Karina Shea, was discovered at, singing Calypso. Alright? I know this story very well, because that is a school that I would have been visiting as a youth leader in NJAC, growing up, where we conducted Calypso seminars and workshops across the country. The person who would have discovered her was himself a young king, a past young king, a Calypsonian. So, who is going to go to Rose Hill under a hail of bullets on a daily basis, which is just almost the foothills of Laventille, just by the place that we call the Greens on Piccadilly Street, right? Who is going to go just behind the bridge, just there? Who in their right mind is going to go just behind the bridge, right there, right in Port of St. As we look out our window, we can see Rose Hill Primary School right here from the opposition office. But who's going to go there? Under this government, where you have a hail of bullets, gunfire, threatening the lives of everyone, including you who want to go there to help. So this PNM is condemning all citizens, and not to mention, of course, in their own constituencies. Okay? Now, before I speak to respond to the Minister of Finance, MP Charles spoke about crime. And one of the biggest issues that affects decisions to invest in a country, decisions for talented persons to stay in a country, is crime. If the level of crime is too high, it affects every single decision that you make as a citizen, whether it's to leave your house, whether it's to make an investment, whether it's to purchase a house, whether it's to send your children to school, what time you go back home, what time you sleep, what time you wake, what time you decide to go and exercise. Every single decision that a citizen makes, the first and most important thing they ask themselves, will I be safe? So there's an important thing to understand, is the mathematics of crime. So the Prime Minister, instead of accepting that he has failed on the murder rate, Guys, the maths, the simple maths. All right, because by his own admission, when he was opposition leader, Keith Rowley said the yardstick that he will use to measure the government's success on crime will be the murder rate. And this year is shaping up to the bloodiest years in the history of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. The bloodiest year was 550 under Patrick Manning, an ex-PNM leader of blessed memory. This year, we have just started November. We only have 59 days left after today, 60 days if you include today, to the end of the year. And we reach 510 already. More than 1.5 murders a day on average. 45 murders a month. So we already going to surpass 2008 under Manning, which was the bloodiest year history of Trinidad and Tobago, as MP Charles reminds me. You know? So what does that mean? Why is that so? It's because there are no consequences for actions. The Prime Minister yesterday had no answers on crime and on the murder rate, except that he is not in the mind of the killer. When women were being threatened and being victims, dying from domestic violence, excuse me, the Prime Minister said he's not in your bedroom, he's not in your choice of men. Now you are being killed, slaughtered, mercilessly, in what is the bloodiest year to date, in terms of months gone so far. What is the bloodiest year to date? This Prime Minister is saying, to hell with you, Trinidad and Tobago, because I am not in the mind of the killer. There is nothing I could do. All we could do is give them the resources. I know the police were feeling downtrodden, so we call them in to give them a good talking to, so to lift up their spirits in the national security meeting. That is the nonsense that he went to Siobhan us to tell the nation that the policemen not feeling so good because they're trying their best. So you went there to give them a pep talk. There's not a Sunday League fet match in the Savannah. You understand? There's not an all-fours tournament. This is the safety and security of every single citizen in this country. Now, how then can you expect companies to come to Trinidad and Tobago to invest? And Semakara just ruled out some big expenditure in Guyana to the tune of millions. 100+ acre facility, I believe. Our capital is leaving Trinidad and Tobago and it's not coming back. It's leaving Trinidad and Tobago, $10 billion left our shores in net outflow for the first 5 years of this government being in office. Under the Kamala Persad-Bissessar-led government, $48 billion TT net flow came in. 10 billion left in the first 5 years under Keith Rowley. And the Minister of Finance came with the biggest lie that the economy was doing well before COVID, but $10 billion left. Now, so the key issue is that the reason why we have these issues with crime is that crime under the PNM has no consequences. There are no consequences for the actions of the criminals, and it's abundantly clear to all honest individuals. All honest individuals will see that the entire suite of actions taken by Kamala Persad-Bissessar as Prime Minister in training persons, in creating jobs in a robust construction sector and energy sector which was intact, with well-paying jobs, not what you're seeing now, with our brightest in the energy sector leaving because they're paying them pittance salaries. People are risking their lives. Look at the men, God rest their soul, who died in that tank, that pipeline in the Gulf of Paria, in Pointe-à-Pierre. When you decide to work in the energy sector, you don't have to come back home. You could die on your assignment. You could drown. A pipeline could explode. Anything can happen. There are real risks. Therefore, you must be paid to match the risks that you are taking. They are leaving because they are getting jobs elsewhere. Okay? Now, so what we see the nation going to 400, from 400 under 400 murders a day, and just around 400 murders a year, so approaching 600. 600. The first time when you look at the charts, in years that the murder rate dropped below 400 was under the Kamala Persad government, and even when it climbed above, it was maintained. There were things that were being done that, if continued, would have contributed to a continual decline in crime. The community comfort patrol. You go to Ranongi Savannah, you go Chancellor Hill, you go in a community, you're seeing a vehicle there parked with security personnel. They were not police, they weren't soldiers, but they were arm of the national security apparatus. You felt safe, and criminals stood aside. So all the crimes of convenience couldn't happen in the spaces that you were. Now, the reality is, elections have consequences. The consequence of the election, Fitzgerald Hines is the Minister of National Security. You understand? Sounds like a sordid joke, but unfortunately it's the reality that we are living in this country. That Fitzgerald Hines is the Minister of National Security. He couldn't even cut it as the Minister of Transport. You understand? He put him as the Minister of National Security. MP Charles went at length on that, so we know that the man is incompetent. But let's look at the social aspect of things. If you are living in a community and the boss, the crime boss, they just call them the boss, right? The boss that everybody rocking with in the community, as the youths like to say. They're rocking with the boss. The boss suffers no consequence for crime, especially under the Keith Rowley government. No consequence. They could kill who they want to kill. They're living life to the fullest. That obviously serves as a motivator to the young person, and is no longer about hotspot areas, because the daring Pennywise robbery, daylight robbery, where those young men killed responsible citizens who were security personnel. They eventually met their death, most of them. Those young boys went to top schools, some of them. Prestigious schools, what we like to call in Trinidad prestige schools. Why they shouldn't have any, but what we like to call prestige schools in Trinidad and Tobago, in South. And on top of that, some of them were wealthy. Parents owned businesses, driving proper vehicles and so on. So these weren't hand-to-mouth people, you know. These young men were well educated, so they weren't persons at the bottom of the social ladder. These persons were wealthy, so they weren't at least middle class, so they weren't persons at the bottom of the economic ladder, the two ladders that the government tries to help people up on. They were not at the bottom of either of them. They were doing well. But because crime to them had no consequence under this government, they felt it a good enterprise to engage in. And most of them, except one, I believe, have now died. So it's not about hotspot areas again. The entire country is a hotspot. Now, what does that mean? If you can't fix crime, you can't fix the economy. It's as simple as that. So you have a prime minister who made a complete mess of crime, management, security, and then he comes now to say he doesn't mind the criminals. So now we go to the Minister of Finance, who was present yesterday. And I want to say the Minister of Finance comes and says he has made an extra $1 billion, $11 billion. So every month you make almost $1 billion extra that you didn't plan to get. But you have Atal Jack complaining that in his company, his group alone, he is owed tens of millions of dollars in VAT refunds. VAT refunds, for the persons who may not know, are not the property of the government, you know, or money property, right? That is the property of the companies. It is due to them legally. The government must pay it after a certain time. They have to pay interest on top of it. So it is not the government's money. And then Atal Jack, who we've named our #1 and only graduate business school after Atal Jack, Graduate School of Business. If Atal Jack the businessman supreme in this country, can't be getting his VAT refunds. Well, they sure whoever else, the fellow around the corner, whether he named Joel Jack or Christopher Jack, you understand? He ain't getting any money. So you have, this is the situation that's happening. We're not hearing the chambers of commerce. In fact, the TT chamber, Trisha Kusal, was praising the government in the after the last budget. I think maybe the members of the TT chamber would want to get with their president to ask their president, what is she doing? Who is she representing? Because if Arthur Locke Jack is not getting his VAT refunds, I'm not sure much members of TT chamber are getting their VAT refunds as well, the ones that VAT refunds are owed to. Then of course, they get $11 billion extra. You would have thought Imbudu would have come and say, well, okay, VAT refunds being paid. You would have thought Minister Imbudu would have come and spoken about increasing the GATE program, bringing back all the professions that they kicked off the GATE program. Many persons who study accounts in this country can't access GATE because they kicked them off the GATE program. Their institutions, entire institutions that were accessing GATE. They closed down hotel school for small money, less than the paintings that they bought in England. Maybe you would have thought that they say, okay, we'll open back hotel school. What they have done is say, okay, well, what we did was we cut down the GATE program so tight that if you did an associate's degree, you can't get no money to do the diploma. So we realized that they were disadvantaging, taking advantage of our children. So you know we'll bring back that if you do a degree that is not a full undergraduate degree, if you get to finish your undergraduate degree. You know what I mean? They manufacture the problem to come and sell the solution. You think we're dotish? We're not going to give you any applause for that. What about persons over 50? You talk about the silver economy. When they entered the workforce, it was 3 decades ago. Some of them 3.5 decades ago, because they entered at the age of 15 and 16, most of them, with school leaving certificates. Persons are 50 plus. They don't have access to GATE. They're looking to increase the retirement age to 65. You're not giving these persons an opportunity to retool themselves. There are many persons who would have studied in this country, and by the age of 50, re-qualified for a new career. I'm a member of my family. She's retired since, but she only became an attorney at law in her late 40s. She started studying well within her 40s. And she retired with long service as an attorney at law. This is after working for over 2 decades as an administrative assistant, administrative clerk and so on. So this government is also taking advantage of the senior citizens. They make an extra $11 billion. Why you can't give persons over 50 access to GATE? Huh? They make an extra $11 billion CDAP program. You're still not giving senior citizens access to CDAP. People are complaining they're not getting the medication when they go to apply for it. They make an extra $11 billion and still have schools unfinished. QF Presbyterian. They have schools in Icacos. They have the ECC Center. There's one in Valencia, I believe, as well. There are many schools in this country that were constructed since 2015, almost complete, and this government, 7 years plus after, have decided to finish them. You make an extra $11 billion. Fix the Chernum school. Finish the schools. You make an extra $11 billion and the road's still bad. You know? And then, of course, the Minister of Finance comes to talk about job creation. And what is the PNM solution for job creation? PNM solution for job creation is not that they're going to fix crime. It's not that they're going to treat with the issues that the chambers have, not the chamber president that want to praise them when the budget reads. You understand? So TT Chamber fix that. You understand? They had a president before who used to give the government it as they needed to get it. They got rid of him and they bring this person and they praising the government. That doesn't make any sense. It's not helping the members of the business community. Alright? So give the business community what they need to expand their output. So you make an extra $11 billion. But who is it benefiting? Alright? So let's look at what the Minister of Finance said specifically. Alright? He said that he went back again to talk about the lowest deficit for 14 years. Now, this is our next unethical. This Minister of Finance is unethical. Completely unethical. This is a bold-faced lie. We run our finances on a cash basis. That is the only reason why you can say that. If the finances of our country run on a crude basis, what does that mean? You didn't pay VAT refunds to businesses, which is owed to them. If you pay the VAT refunds owed to the business, the deficit would have been in the billions. If you pay the CDAP program so that the senior citizens can get access to it, the deficit would have been in the billions. There's monies owed to contractors. If you pay them what you owe them, the deficit would have been in the billions. And of course, you keep delaying public sector wage negotiations, lowballing them with 2% and so on. 0.0001001, like if it's binary code that we learn in computer science. You understand? You lowball them so that they wouldn't settle. So you go to the industrial court. So then if you settle, you have to pay billions in the settlement arrangement. So then you have our next deficit again. The reason why you had deficits under the Kamla Prasad Biswas in the later years is because they decided to settle wage negotiations along the way. The leader, the Prime Minister Kamla Prasad Biswas, decided to provide CDAP medication. That's why you had deficits. The political leader of the UNC decided to expand the GATE program, give access to subsidy, you make $11 billion extra. And you can't manage the price of gas? Of course not, because you close down the refinery. Now Guyana opening a refinery. Suriname already have a small one. Guyana opening one to look at 30,000 barrels a day. We could have had our refinery running to capacity by adding the crude from Guyana. So you close down the refinery, and we have to study, well, okay, Jamaica have to pay a high price for petrol, so we should pay a high price. Jamaica don't produce oil. We produce oil. It is our birthright to benefit as citizens. All right? The fuel subsidy is my dividend as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. The fuel subsidy is a dividend to each and every citizen. It's not a gift from PNM. It's not a gift from Balize House. It is your birthright. And this government has taken that from you because they have shut down the refinery. And of course, our political leaders said that once we get back into office, when we do, we shall reopen that refinery. Of course, it won't be overnight because those guys, since 2018, this government has done enough damage to it. But we'll ensure that we have a refinery so we have our own energy security in this country. Now, the Minister of Finance you talk about deficit. So that's nonsense. It's a cash basis, and they've been deferring expenses, holding back payments. Even in the finance bill, they had payments due to the regional organizations that they withheld with no justification. They make $11 billion extra. They couldn't pay the regional organizations their due. That's delinquency. In the finance world that I am from, they call that delinquency, and for no just reason. It's like a man own the company, and he tell the boss man things tight. So let's take a lower wage, take less money this month, and then you see him throwing a big party with a press conference announcing he make $11 billion extra. That is criminal. Minister of Finance is unethical. And then again, he comes again to make a fool of himself, to talk about nominal GDP and his $50 billion growth in GDP. Which economy grew by $50 billion? Not Trinidad and Tobago. Colin Bud is a fool. No economist in the country will risk their professional integrity to say that the economy has grown by $50 billion in the last 2 years during COVID. During COVID, where 6,000 companies closed down. Colin Bud, you are a complete idiot. There's no way that you could see what you have said as being ethically sound. There are ethics in every single profession. If you are a doctor, there are professional ethics. There are things you cannot say to a patient. You can't disclose the patient's details without their express permission. If you're an attorney, there's attorney-client privilege, and I'm sure there are other ethical codes in the profession. As an economist myself, there are ethical codes in our profession. So therefore, you will find not a single economist, not even the ones in the PNM. Go and ask Dr. Terence Farrell to talk about $50 billion growth in nominal GDP. He will never do it. because that is against his ethical code as an economist, PNM or no PNM. So that is why Coleman Wood has to say it, because they cannot get a single economist to come out and say nominal GDP grew by 50 billion, so the economy has grown by $50 billion. When the CSO, the same economists and statisticians in the CSO and the central bank is publishing that the economy declined last year, and for the first 3 months of this year declined. So Coleman Wood is totally unethical. And he's a complete fool to think that the country would accept that type of rhetoric. Alright? So I'm speaking on behalf of all economists who are disgusted when I spoke to them. Disgusted that the Minister of Finance is trampling on the ethical codes of the profession of economists by bandying about this nonsense that the economy has grown in the last 2 years during COVID. Now, and of course, this extra $11 billion, when you look at the United Nations website, news.un.org, as at September 9, 2022, 5,767 persons were killed in the war in Ukraine. 8,292 others were injured. So this $11 billion that this Minister of Finance boasts about is on the graves of these 5,767 people. So that is not something to be celebrated about. That is something to be retrospect, to be circumspect about. Circumscribe yourself by the fact that this has nothing to do with government policy. This has simply to do with a war and the deaths of human beings. So what are you going to do with this money? Because unless you plan to, you hope that the next 5,000 people die this year, then you're going to make the next $11 billion. What are you going to plan to do with this money to ensure you reverse the negative cycle in terms of the decline in jobs, over 100,000 jobs lost based on the NIB report up to 2020. You didn't add no jobs in COVID. So 112,000 jobs lost from September when they came in office to June 30th, 2020. What are you going to do to our jobs? The only thing the Minister of Finance spoke about with regard to job creation was that they're going to start back some construction projects. And that will help heat up the economy. Now, I never heard more nonsense than that in my life. So I don't think I could really respond to that. And as I close, the Minister of Finance needs to remember that every profession has ethics. And the ethics of the profession with which he is supposed to be upholding as the Minister of Finance, because more economists per capita work in the Ministry of Finance than in any ministry in this country, possibly in any entity, any organization in this country. Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Trade, of course. The rest of us are in central bank. There are some agricultural economists as well, potentially maybe in Ministry of Agriculture. But the majority of economists, if they're not in academia in the University of the West Indies, they are at the Ministry of Finance. And you have a Minister of Finance trampling on the ethics of the profession of economists. And I'm sorry there is no visible economics association. Maybe we need to form one in this country. So that whenever anyone tramples on the professional ethics of the profession of economists, we could pull them to book and give them a sound licking that they deserve. Because the Minister of Finance has no place in misrepresenting the economic position of this country. That should be misbehavior in public office. The economy didn't grow in the last 2 years. The CSO has made it clear the economy has declined. Alright? But I guess when the Chambers of Commerce, CUSAL et al., could be giving the government a rubber stamp, even though their members are not getting the VAT refunds, there is no surprise. There is no surprise that the Minister of Finance could come and say anything that he wants. You have to give it up for Arthur Lockjack. Arthur Lockjack has put his business on the line by coming to challenge the government publicly on the record that his business is not receiving his VAT refunds. Maybe I feel like Jack should be the chairman or the president of the TT chamber. Alright, so at this stage, I want us to remind the citizens of this country that by all the economic indicators that we look at, whether it's overall manufacturing sector output, whether it's GDP levels, whether it's jobs created, that the Kamla Persad Bissessar is by far on record the best that this country has had, and the only way to get back those jobs, to get back economic growth, and to get a government that respects the ethics of the economics profession, is by getting rid of this government that has failed on the economy, continues to fail on the economy, and will never succeed, because the only thing that the Minister of Finance spoke about to create jobs is some work in construction. You understand? And of course, runaway crime. So at this stage, I'll give it back to MP Charles to continue our press conference.
There's some questions coming in. Last night, the Prime Minister promised that 2,500 more CCTV cameras are going to be purchased by the government for $80 million. We know that in February of this year, or April of this year, Mr. Hines will have indicated that of the 1,796 CCTV cameras currently installed, about 733 of them were completely non-functional. Do you have confidence that these new cameras are going to be properly maintained or better maintained?
Trinidad and the Ministry of National Security in particular has an issue with maintenance. Whether it is the police vehicles that we see parked up in Vemcott throughout Trinidad, whether it is the question of our Coast Guard vessels that citizens see tied up in Stobbles Bay rather than patrolling. Given the statement by the minister himself that 733, I think, were non-functional, he was asked, when will they be fixed? And he couldn't give a clear answer. So we are in dire straits. This government takes the position that they build buildings, they buy vehicles, they buy equipment, but maintenance is an issue. What we have is breakdown maintenance. Those of us who are project management and whatnot, rather than routine maintenance. Every 5,000 miles you change the oil. Every whatever you change the brakes, etc. Our government buys, it breaks down, and then they either tender and it takes another year, and that's the problem with the scanners. That they're broken down, they buy new ones, it works for a year or so, and then there's complete breakdown. I have no confidence that this government has what it takes to purchase equipment, maintain the equipment, and to ensure a 24/7 optimal operation. Let me say something with the CCTV. The CCTVs are the physical infrastructure. It requires a whole army of individuals to monitor those equipment 24/7 to see what happens. In England, whenever there's a crime, they could immediately tell you the person left Manchester and he took a subway and he went here, and they could tell you his activity for the entire day. I am not too sure that we have that capability in Trinidad and Tobago. So they could talk. They could talk. We are not convinced. There's the other issue that we have with the procurement of these equipment. Until this government gets serious and realizes that we are in the 21st century and that they have a properly organized procurement policy arrangement, we are in trouble. So I see no change. Talk. He's going to buy 2,500, or sorry, he said 2,005 being installed and 2,005 coming down. I have no confidence that that is going to lead to any reduction in crime because of the associated issues with the technology that is being imported.
Last night, the Prime Minister also lamented the fact that we have now crossed 500 murders for the year. We are on track to perhaps reach 600 murders. But the Prime Minister also said that that if it were not for the actions of his government, the crime situation would have been much more worse. How would you?
That is nonsense. That is again grasping at straws. What is the data that informs the Prime Minister's observation that the crime would have been higher if they did not make the necessary intervention? That is all talk. That is the same comment. Is the comment like, I am not in your bedroom. What is the data for saying that making the wrong choices lead to increased murder rates by women? No data. He gets up a morning, thinks up something, it sounds nice, it could last for a little while until he comes with another argument. So it's the same thing with the crime as a public health emergency. He got up a morning, it sounded a good idea, he threw it at us, and I am not too sure today whether that committee is functioning, whether it has its terms of reference, what are the timelines for delivery of the outputs of that committee. He forms committee, he talks things, and if you challenge him, because you see he's a bully, so he talks and you can't challenge him. And if you challenge him, he gets angry, so that he never confronts the issues. So I'm saying the Prime Minister does not know what he's talking about. That he cannot tell me with a straight face the data that informs that decision that the crime would have been higher if he did not make the necessary intervention. In fact, I'm telling him today, if Kamala Prasad Bisesa were in government today, we would have murders under 450 for this year.
MP Charles, the Prime Minister last night also made it clear that he is standing by the Minister of National Security, Fitzgerald Hinds. The opposition has consistently called for Mr. Hinds to be removed. How do you respond?
Guess why? He knows that if he takes the Ministry of National Security, he doesn't have a clue. He cannot solve it. He has no ideas. He has no vision. He has no track record. He has no leadership. So he is glad that Hinds is there, because Hinds takes the licks for him. Because the alternative, if I were a leader and my country had the kinds of problems of crime affecting the economy, as my colleague mentioned, I would take responsibility and lead from in front. But he is hiding behind Stuart Young first. When Stuart Young failed miserably, he's now hiding behind Fitzgerald. And I dare the Prime Minister to take over the Ministry of National Security and bring the crime rate down to an acceptable level. He cannot. So this Prime Minister is just throwing out things. He could bring it down. He cannot. And he must continue with Fitzgerald, because there's nobody in that cabinet anyone who has a handle to deal with the crime situation. No one. They haven't published. There's no track record. There is no performance criteria to let us know that they would perform better. So he has to stick with Fitzgerald Hinds, Ethelbert Hinds, because he has no other choice.
Also last night, the Prime Minister said that with regards to the Vincent Nelson matter, the Cabinet was unaware of that situation. There are certain documents floating online that appear to be questions from the DPP, in which former Attorney General Mr. Arawi would have indicated to the Director of Public Prosecutions that he discussed the Vincent Nelson matter with the Prime Minister, with Minister Young, and with Minister in his ministry. Yes, I remember that. Do you think the Prime Minister or Mr. Arawi should perhaps make it clear on who knew what exactly about the Nelson matter?
But let me tell Trinidad and Tobago clearly, we are not going to let Nelson Gate fall by the wayside like Email Gate. There are questions that must be answered. I think the media, the Express, has asked the Prime Minister certain questions. I think the Law Association has asked questions, and we, the UNC, will not let this issue. Somebody knows something in the PNM. Somebody whether the Prime Minister is not speaking the truth, or Faris Alwari is misinformed, or he's misadvising himself. Somebody knows something. And we in the UNC, under the leadership of Kamala Persad-Bissessar, will ensure that this is the Waterloo of the People's National Movement. You see, Rowley is accustomed to shouting, email gate, and he gets out of control, and he hopes that he mesmerizes you. We will not be fooled. Cool, calm, and logic. Mr. Prime Minister, tell us with a straight face, what did you know? And what is Faris Alwari not speaking the truth? One way or the other. And let me tell them something. When we get into office, as sure as night follows day, a number of persons have questions to answer, and they will have to answer it. And I want to tell the public servants, do not be misguided by political direction. Get it in writing, because someday you will be called upon to answer questions about your ethical performance in the performance of your duty. There are service commissions that protect you from the politics. They cannot fire you. So if a minister asks you to do nonsense, tell him put it in writing and keep a copy at home. As sure as night follows day, questions, senior government officials will have to answer questions about their track record in these times. There are too many problems that our children are looking on, criminals are looking on, and saying, if the priest could play, who is we? If you could step out 45 times in the recusals and leave your partner inside there, and then you step out as a kind of a baton passing, I stay out, you fix up, I go in, you fix for you. Questions will have to be asked, and they will have to defend themselves ethically.
Mr. Speaker, the government has identified construction jobs as one means in which to boost employment, but those jobs are short, medium term. What is the opposition's plan in creating jobs?
So the opposition's plan in creating jobs is, as outlined in our Plan 2020 document, speaks to two things. One, looking at creating growth poles in the country. And the other aspect has to do with development corridors. So development corridors, simple, the East-West corridor, the southern corridor from Citrus to Moruga, and focusing on the type of industry that is indigenous in that area. So the East-West corridor is more family-sized businesses doing light manufacturing, distribution, and so on. And that's from San Grande in the east up to the Gomata. In the south, it's more agro-based processing. So you have fish processors in Cedrus, you have agro-based processors in Moruga and Barco and so on and there. But construction of and supporting the road network, we carried the highway to Point Fortin. When we finished that, it's taken them 7 years to put pitch on the highway to reach Point Fortin. They can't finish that as yet. So we will complete whatever is left of the highway to be completed, and of course strengthen the road network in the southern part of the country. And what that would do is help create businesses in those areas that can benefit from the agricultural feedstock in the southern part of the country. In the eastern part, of course, we have the blue economy and the green economy. So you have the bread basket, that is Beach and Sangre Grande down to Rio Claro. And of course, you have the heritage of fishing and so on, connecting those things meaningfully into the national grid. Now, it was done already. To bring $48 billion to the economy, net foreign direct investment flows, was based on deliberate planning by the Kamala Persad-Bissessar government. A simple example, in terms of helping to rebase the economy, that would have helped create the 55,000 jobs that should have created, and would have added more, is if you go to Central today, you would see the aquatic center, the cycling velodrome. In addition, enhancing the sports plant that is there with the Atobolan Stadium. The main hotel in Central is Cara Suites, and before the pandemic, they were running at full capacity in off-peak periods. Because peak in Trinidad is the winter season. All right. and they were running at full capacity throughout the year because you had athletes coming down, college students and so on, for warm weather training, and then persons coming for tournaments and sports tournaments and so on. So that was the vision in sports tourism. But then you had medical tourism as well, with the Cuba Health Facility, Cuba Children's Hospital, Tobago. Imagine if PNM couldn't finish June Hospital in Tobago, right? In Keith Rowley constituency, and Keith Rowley is a senior minister in that government. So it's rebasing the economy away from what we in the Caribbean are familiar with, which is natural resource extraction, oil and gas, agriculture, and sun, sea, and sand, and festivals. We're basing it so the tourism sector will be linked in a more meaningful way to the economy and building on the high level of human capital development. When they close down the GATE program, and they close down in a certain way, they close down the energy skills acquisition centers, and they close down hotel school, and you move access to GATE for persons studying accounting in certain colleges and so on. What this PNM government has done is done two things at the same time. They've hampered business growth, so they've reduced the amount of jobs available, and they've reduced the educational capacity of the citizens. So human capital is not improving at the same time. So we will get there. Of course, we will only get there when Trinidad and Tobago decides to put aside PNM rhetoric and vote for performance, which is what the UNC will deliver.
Mr. Speaker, today the U.S. Federal Reserve announced a 75% point rate hike in an effort to dampen the effects of inflation in the U.S. market. And do you think that the Minister of Finance here should be doing more to perhaps outline a clear strategy on how to tackle inflation?
So the problem with how economics works in our country versus the US, our inflation is tied to imports. Alright? So in terms of food prices, construction materials and so on, because we are an open economy, we buy most of the things we need. And therefore, if inflation works really specifically from imports, so to manage inflation in our country, it's things like making sure that the customs duties are more manageable, as opposed to what they're charging now. Maybe look at a more manageable regime with import duties, so that person can get items cheaper. But this government has added a 7% online purchase tax, so they're trying to help the cost of items come down. All right, looking at reducing VAT on certain items, they have not done that. They've brought back VAT on all of the items that were VAT exempt under the Kamala Prasad basis of government. So our mechanisms to manage inflation has to do with the cost plus pricing, price of goods before they reach the consumer. What the rate increase in America will impact us with is if persons have savings, public servants, business persons, they have savings and they want to get more returns in terms of they use the US dollar as a shelter for money then. They want to save in US, they may decide to go to the US, move the capital from Trinidad and Tobago to the US markets to save. So you could end up having capital flight. And what tends to happen as a result of that is central bank tends to raise the policy rate. So we actually get higher rates here because the US raises their rates, because the central bank is trying to protect capital from leaving the country. And in fact, we end up having it ends up not necessarily working in your favor in terms of prices, because that increases the cost of doing business. Because banks have to borrow, businesses have to borrow, and the cost of borrowing goes up. So it's counterintuitive in terms of what the US does. It affects us in a different way. Our mechanisms to manage inflation are more linked to the cost of imports and the taxes that government charges for goods and services. And this government has been increasing taxes across the board, and they have been decidedly stubborn when it comes to the question of reducing import duties. Even though Guyana has taken the lead, we in the opposition have spoken to them about using the old freight rates when companies import items, so that they don't pay more to the government. But they don't care. They see customs as merely a contributor to the treasury, and they don't see the connection that has to the cost of food. And they have been increasing the prices of goods by virtue of trying to take more money from customs than they should.
he also mentioned the issue regarding anti-lockjack and the problem with battery
Battery
funds.
funds, yeah.
Anti-lockjack also stated that one of the side effects of the late payment of battery funds was the impact it was having on the export sector, because many businesses price their goods to export with VAT, but they're not getting it back. What exactly is the problem that the ministry is having in not paying these refunds on time?
Well, the Minister of Finance is treating it as like he's a bookkeeper. And now, even though from the stance that I would have taken earlier, you could understand why the TT Chambers president might be coy or shy to hit the government on VAT refunds. Maybe they are all owed VAT refunds too. Understand? Or maybe even their members are afraid and telling the TT Chambers CEO, president, don't raise that issue because we're afraid we wouldn't get it at all. You know? So the government has militarized VAT refunds against the business community. It's just that Jack has decided enough is enough. The main issue really is Imbert has decided he could make himself look good by not paying them what is due to them. Because as he said, he made an extra 11 billion. He said the money just sitting down there, he didn't expect to use it. You understand? So why not pay the VAT refunds to the businesses? It's simply in the mind of the Minister of Finance and a Prime Minister who doesn't care anything about the private sector, unless of course maybe. So the evidence is clear. The Prime Minister doesn't care. So it doesn't make sense trying to find a reason for him to care about them. Because he has demonstrated that by keeping him Imbert as the Minister of Finance and decidedly not paying VAT refunds when they're due.
That's all the questions we have.
Yes,
That's all the questions.
that's all the questions. Well, thanks very much, viewing audience. It has come to an end. We thank you for viewing. I wish to thank my colleague, Chief Economist. I think it was very enlightening. And we look forward to seeing you on Sunday at 10:30 at the Sunday press conference. So thank you for viewing and have a good evening.